The offense struggled once again at Tennessee Titans training camp, and at this point, it's fair to expect a slow start when the regular season kicks off. I'll explain on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's show, we're going to cover the last training camp practice of the year. The Titans offense had another down day, and it's fair to expect a slow start to the year. Also, Brian Callahan said there's only about 4 to 6 roster spots still up for grabs. We're going to talk about the back-end locks and who should fill those final spots. Before we get into it, I do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. And speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a bonus episode previewing the Titans' final preseason game of the year against the New Orleans Saints. Sunday, I'm going live right after the game to break down all the action. And then next week, I'm going to have a ton of predictions for you guys. My official Titans record prediction, who I think will be the MVP of the team, the defensive player of the year, different superlatives like that. We're going to have a fantasy preview. And then the week after that, the regular season is here. So again, make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed, throw a thumbs up on the video, throw a tighten up down in the chat. With that being said, tough day for the offense. Tough day out there. Will Levis was missing high throughout the day on his throws. Brian Callahan said after practice, quote, "Not what we're looking for." Not only did the first team offense struggle against the first team defense, but there's multiple reports that the Titans first team offense struggled against the second team defense. Weren't able to get anything going. Saw a report out there of multiple sacks from different players on the Titans defense. Big Jeff, Harold Landry, Jack Gibbons, Will Levis, and the timing to Calvin Ridley, not necessarily there, according to, I believe it's Teron Davenport. Some missed throws to Ridley out there. Will Levis was almost picked off by Jack Gibbons once again. Again, just a struggle out there. Like I said, Brian Callahan, the coach himself, said today was not what we're looking for. All right. And it wasn't just Will Levis in the passing offense. Well, I mean, it's part of the passing offense, but I mean, J.C. Latham got beat for a sack by Harold Landry and Khalid Duke, the Titans' undrafted free agent edge rusher. So a 7th-round rookie and an undrafted free agent rookie beating your first-round starting left tackle in practice. Look, everybody's going to get beat, but, it's just unfortunate to hear. I would say, let me also throw this in there. There were some good plays. There were some connections to Tyler Boyd. That continues to look like a good connection, according to reports. Also, probably the highlight of practice, according to multiple sources, was a 15-yard fade in red zone period in the back of the end zone to Calvin Ridley from Will Levis. So you love hearing that. There were highlights on the day. It wasn't, a complete massacre out there. But overall, again, I go back to Brian Callahan's quote. It's not what we're looking for. And after the Titans' struggles against Seattle last week in the joint practices, and then early in training camp, it was domination every day by the defense. Now, that swayed back, and the offense has had their moments in the past 10 days, last 2 weeks of training camp practices. This week, last week with the joint practices, and then before. There have been moments, right? But I think that at this point, it is fair to expect a slow start. Now, we've had conversations about the offense, about training camp, like with the microscope. Like we're zooming in on today's practice, today's camp, what happened in today's events. That's what we've been talking about for the last 3 to 4 weeks. But big picture wise, I have said that my expectation is the Titans will get off to a slow start when we talk about their overall record and performance and wins and losses at the beginning of the year. I have said that personally. I think the Titans will get off to a slow start, and it'll take time. And this offensive line will get a lot better as the season goes on because it's so young and there are so many new pieces and it's a brand new system. All right, if the Titans are having these struggles this consistently with their own defense that they see every day and they know, and then they had struggles last week against Seattle's defense, which I think Seattle's defense will be pretty good, led by Mike McDonald, who I mentioned last week, one of the best defensive minds in the entire NFL. But I think it's fair to look at what we've seen throughout the totality of training camp, the preseason, and be like, this offense may struggle a little bit out of the gate. It may take some time. You know what I mean? It may take some time. I think that you get all excited from the preseason activities and the training camp hype and all that stuff. And optimism is unbridled right now around the NFL. It's not just Titans fans. It's not just us. Every team is thinking, hey, the best version of our team is still possible. And it is. Technically, it is. But I think there are some realities that show up when you start playing real football that maybe most fans would tell you in February, yeah, there's no way that the Titans, like I have said, the Titans aren't a Super Bowl contender this year. They're not winning the Super Bowl. And I've said that consistently, okay? That this is not, I mean, you get into the playoffs, anything can happen, of course. But this is not a roster that's good enough to win a Super Bowl. They're not. They're trying to patch over some things this year because you couldn't fix everything. We went into the offseason saying you can't fix everything overnight. And now people are like, the Titans are making the playoffs no matter what, blah, blah, blah. Look, the right side of the offensive line is still not great. The Titans still have a young offensive line in general. It's still the new system, new place, new people, new faces, places, faces, people, mixing it all together. So I just think that while I think the Titans will be massively improved, I think it's fair after going through, remember, training camp's over now. It's fair to look at everything now and sit back and be like, okay, maybe the offense takes a little bit more time to get going than we necessarily hoped for. And I think that, you could say, oh, it's just practice. Oh, it's just this. Oh, it's just, but after the struggles against Seattle and then after the struggles today, it's like, and the slow start from yesterday turned around on Wednesday's practice, but it was a slow start for the offense too. The domination early, like, I think it may take some time for this team to gel more than other teams that have played together more and have more continuity and have more cohesion. Like, I think the Titans could still be a pretty solid team this year. But again, it may take a little bit of time before we get to a version of the Titans that we're very happy with. You know what I mean? And we're over the moon hype for next season. Like, it may take some time to see that. And I think it would be fair to have that be your takeaway from this training camp. So, also, I just want to say the Will Levis video the Titans put out, their, what do they call it, like Music City Football or something like that. Their video series was on Will Levis, and it came out on Thursday morning. It was so awesome. It's so great. I was so fired up. I literally shed some tears, like just hype for what happened. I'm an emotional guy, okay? I'm not afraid of it. Men are allowed to have emotions. I love my football team. But it's just so Titans fan experience. Like, this is what being a Titans fan is. Sweet video, all hype, and then Levis has a bad day at practice and the offense has a down day again. I mean, Jesus. But anyway, let's talk some roster math because Brian Callahan had an interesting comment on Thursday. Before we do want to let you guys know that today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day. You always have a certain cheat meal. Maybe you never skip therapy day. Look, when your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, that's when your non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. I've worked with BetterHelp before. It was a good experience. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, you have to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month today. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. So we talked about the down day for the offense, and while it's not something that people want to hear, I think we could expect a little bit of a slow start. It may take a little longer for things to come together than we were all hoping. Just training camp, preseason, it may take a month or so into the regular season for this offense, but now I want to transition more into roster math conversations, because that is really what the pressing issue is for the Tennessee Titans right now. We want to see a good performance on Sunday in the preseason game. Absolutely. It would be nice to see the offense play well. Maybe I'll have a different tune next week. But right now, what really matters is who's going to make this team, the roster spots. And Brian Callahan had an interesting comment on Thursday. He said, basically, there are 4 to 5 roster spots up for grabs right now, which means, obviously that means 47, 48, 49 players are already locked in. All right. So there's not as many roster spots up for grabs as maybe it seems, or maybe you would think. You know what I mean? Like, the coaches have a pretty good idea at this point, going through training camp, OTAs, summer workouts, all that. They know who should make the team. All right. So it leaves us with the question, who's a lock to make this team right now? Like, who has those locked up spots right now? And I'm going to tell you who I think has the locked up spots. I'm going to tell you what I think the gap is between my locked up spots and the locked up spots for Brian Callahan. And at the end of the show, we're going to talk about the players who I think actually have a realistic chance to get those open spots. All right. So we're going to look at the roster math in a little bit of a different way. Before we get into it, do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. You're going to get daily insights, the best fantasy draft strategies, so you can win your league this season. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So my locks, these are the players that I think are absolutely 100% making the team. I have no doubt in my soul that these players are making the team. Not a single shred of doubt. Levis and Rudolph, Spears and Pollard, Ridley, Hopkins, Boyd, Burks, NWI, and Jaquan Jackson. I have moved him into a lock at wide receiver. Chig, Josh Wiley, Nick Vanette. On the offensive line, J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Dylan Radins, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, the starting offensive line, and then Brunskill and Jerron Christian. So that's 20 players on the offensive side of the ball that I think are locks. Like, they're making the team. No doubt about it. No question. They are locks. Okay? Let me know if you disagree with any of those. I think Jerron Christian is one maybe you could disagree with. But other than that, but I think Christian is better and more reliable than Duncan or Juku. So that's why I went that way. On defense, L'Jarius Sneed, Cheeto, Roger, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Safety, Hooker, Diggs, Adams, Molden. The 6 linebackers, Murray, Gibbons, Campbell, Williams, Reese, Cedric Gray. Although we talked about it earlier this week, Cedric Gray may ultimately go to IR when the season starts, which would open up another spot, of course, here in my math. And then Landry, Key, Weaver, Harrell, Sweat, Big Jeff, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Keandre Coburn, which, like Jerron Christian, may be the one controversial one, but the Titans are absolutely keeping 4 to 5 interior defensive linemen. You can't go without that. You literally can't have 5 as the minimum that they have to carry on the interior defensive line. Especially, they were saying they don't want people to play more than 5 to 6 snaps in a row on the interior defensive line. So you got to have, I think they're going to ultimately have 6 interior defensive linemen, but all 6 aren't on the roster right now. So I'm putting Coburn in there. He is going to be Tavondre Sweat's direct backup. And I continue to say he is one of Tavondre Sweat's mentors, babysitters. Either way, He's going to make the team. He was locked the moment Tavondre Sweat was drafted. And then you have Folk, Stone, and Cox. So that's 25. So for me, that's 45 spots that are locked already that I feel 100% certain those guys are making this team. Well, Brian Callahan said there are 4 to 5 spots that are open, which if we look at it 5, that means 48 spots are locked. 49, 50, 51, 52, 53. 5 spots open. 48 players are locked. So if I have 45 players locked and Brian Callahan is saying there's 48 players locked, who are the other 3? Who are the other 3? Well, here's the list that I'm looking at. That any of these players I think could be the next 3 that are locked. Malik Willis, Hassan Haskins, Julius Chestnut, Kyle Phillips, Kearis Jackson, David Martin Robinson, Andrew Rupsich, Jalen Duncan, John Ojukwu, Quentin Bohanna, Caleb Murphy, and Trey Avery. Those are the guys that I think are the potential locks that are left. Now, out of that group of guys, out of that group right there, Willis, Haskins, Chestnut, Phillips, Kearis Jackson, David Martin Robinson, Andrew Rupsich, Jalen Duncan, John Ojukwu, Quentin Bohanna, Caleb Murphy, Trey Avery, the 3 players that I think are the locks that I'm missing. I have 45. Callahan has 48. The 3 players that, if I had to guess, which 3 players are the 3 players I'm leaving out that should be considered locks, to me, it's Julius Chestnut, Andrew Rupsich, and Quentin Bohanna. Now, there are multiple reasons for that. Number 1, Julius Chestnut is the 3rd best running back on the team in terms of running the ball. Julius Chestnut was getting some run with the first team offense recently. He's not overtaken Pollard or Spears, but if one of those dudes get hurt, the Titans don't want to have to give the ball to Hassan Haskins. The Titans don't want to have to just increase the load of the running back that didn't get hurt. That's not how they want to run this offense. So they need to have at least 3 running backs on the roster that they believe can actually take carries and make something out of them. And that's not Hassan Haskins, it's Julius Chestnut. So Chestnut to me is the first lock that I may be missing. Next, I say Andrew Rupsich. Andrew Rupsich got some first-team opportunities at right guard. He's Peter Skoronski's direct backup at left guard. All right. The Titans have Daniel Brunskill, who I think is a lock on the interior offensive line, but Brunskill is a backup center in this system. He could play guard in a pinch, but he's nowhere near big enough and strong enough to fit the guard requirements of Bill Callahan. So I don't think that they would want Daniel Brunskill to be the number 1 backup guard. I think that goes to Andrew Rupsich. So then you would have Rupsich, Brunskill, and Jerron Christian as your primary 3 backup offensive linemen to make your 8-man group with your starting 5. So Chestnut, Rupsich are my first 2. And then I think the last one is Quentin Bohanna. All right, I'm not a big fan of Quentin Bohanna. I think the Titans could do better. I feel the same about Keandre Coburn too. But again, back to what I was saying about Keandre Coburn. The Titans want to rotate their interior defensive line a ton to keep guys fresh. They're not going to go into the season with only 4 guys on the roster or at interior defensive line. They want to make sure they have at least 5 there. And I think they could look to add a 6th guy off someone else's team. Now, we'll get into that in just a moment, but that's my 3 locks. I had 45. Brian Callahan says 48. I think Chestnut, Rupsich, and Bohanna are those other guys. Now, what about the next 5 spots? Let's talk about those. Before we do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates and professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but they might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you aren't looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. That's why LinkedIn has 2.5 million small businesses using it for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Talked about a down day for the offense. Talked about the locks that I might not be locking, and Brian Callahan is, and who could fill those 3 spots. Now I want to talk about those final 5 spots that Brian Callahan talked about. Who is on the bubble for those spots? Who could take those spots? Before I get into it, thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Make sure that you also check out Locked On Fantasy Football. You're going to get daily insights, the best fantasy draft strategies, so you can win your league this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football actually down in the description, so you don't even got to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, Jalen Harrell film video out on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel. Jaquan Jackson film breakdown out. Malik Willis film breakdown out right now. Those were the 3 videos I did this week. I hope you guys will go check those out. Link to the Tic Tac Titans channel is down below in the description as well. Also, I'll be live on Sunday after the game to break down the Titans' final preseason game. All right, promo's over. We just talked about who the missing locks are, is what I'll call them. Who are the missing locks? And I picked Chestnut, Rupsich, and Bohanna to go with my original locks, which gives me 48 locked spots, which means there are 5 roster spots that are open. Brian Callahan said 4 to 5 at his press conference on Thursday. So who are the players that are on the bubble to get those final 5 spots? Number 1 for me is Malik Willis, then Hassan Haskins, then Kyle Phillips, then Kearis Jackson, then David Martin Robinson, then Jalen Duncan, then John Ojukwu, then Caleb Murphy, then Trey Avery, then Gabe Judy Lawley, one or the other. It's going to be Avery or Gabe Judy Lawley, Mike Brown, Matthew Jackson, and TK McClendon. So let me just say this. I have said already this week, and I've covered it, I do not think that Malik Willis makes this team. Number 1, the Titans may not keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster at all. Brian Callahan talked about that this week and and said it's not necessary, you know. Also, I think that there will be 3rd quarterbacks that are better than Malik Willis that are available, that the Titans can get off someone else's roster cuts and put on their practice squad. Think the 2 third quarterbacks the Titans faced in the preseason, significantly better than Malik Willis. Josh Dobbs and PJ Walker. They've both won games, a lot of games at the NFL level. Well, PJ Walker hasn't won a lot, but Malik's only won 1, right? He's 1-2 in his 3 career starts. Never thrown a touchdown pass in the NFL. PJ Walker and Josh Dobbs are way better players than Malik Willis. So, 3rd quarterbacks on other teams are good too. You know, there are better ones than Malik out there. So it's not oh no, they lost Malik. There are guys that they could pick up. They get cut by other teams that are better and put them on their practice squad. So I don't think it's Malik. Hassan Haskins, you get a spot. I've said this, and people try to fight me on it all the time. They're like, Hassan Haskins sucks at running back. Why would they keep him? Guys, you don't understand. He is an excellent special teams player. And Brian Callahan even said that those final spots primarily will come down to special teams. Who can help him on special teams to get those final spots? Hassan Haskins was the best special teams player on the entire team in 2022. He was a rookie. He's going to make the team. He's going to make the team. He's a great special teams player. So out of the 5 remaining spots, Hassan Haskins, you get 1. Kyle Phillips, Kearis Jackson. I just don't think the Titans are keeping 7 wide receivers. I just don't. Phillips is banged up with the hamstring. Kearis Jackson is banged up with the knee bruise. I just don't think the Titans keep 7 wide receivers. I don't. So I'm skipping over both those guys. Then we go to David Martin Robinson. And as I said in my roster predictions earlier this week, I think David Martin Robinson makes this team. He's been excellent. He was good on Thursday in practice too. I saw a report that say he caught multiple passes from Mason Rudolph with the second team. He might be a better player than Nick Van Nett right now. So I'm going with David Martin Robinson in the second spot with Hassan Haskins. So 3 spots left. 3 spots left. Then we go to the offensive line again. Jalen Duncan or John Ojukwu. I have them keeping Andrew Rupsich and Daniel Brunskill and Jerron Christian as backup offensive linemen. So if 2 of those guys are interior guys, if they keep 9 offensive linemen, the 9th offensive lineman is not going to be an interior guy as well. So sorry, Cole Spencer. You played well. Sorry, Corey Levin. Sorry. Doesn't make sense. It's going to be Jalen Duncan or John Ojukwu. For me, I just couldn't keep either of them. I mean, one of those guys you're going to be able to get back on practice squad. The Titans' offensive line isn't going to be one that gets poached a ton. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to be the case. That also means I don't think Leroy Watson makes the team after the Titans traded a 7th-round pick for him. That was a flyer pick. They had 3 7th-round picks. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But yeah, Jalen Duncan, John Ojukwu, I don't think either of them are good enough to save on the 53. I think you let both of them go, and whichever one doesn't get picked up, if one of them does get picked up at all, then you bring that one back. I think Jalen Duncan would be okay to bring back because John Ojukwu, I think, is probably a little bit better, but Duncan is a younger player with more development, so they'll probably bring back. But I think John Ojukwu is the better player, so I'd like to see him go to the practice squad. But anyways, I'm not keeping either of them in my final 3 spots. Then you have Caleb Murphy, and I just couldn't do it. I would rather keep and I made a mistake. Shane Ray. I didn't throw Shane Ray in here anywhere. I think Shane Ray has a good chance to make the roster. He's in these bubble spots. But I've gotten less confident about Shane Ray making the team here recently. So I'm not certain about that. I feel more confident in moving away from Caleb Murphy, leaving him on the practice squad, and then going to Trey Avery and Gabe Judy Lawley. And it's going to be one of those guys. I hope it's Gabe Judy Lawley personally, but Trey Avery is going to make the team. That's what I think. So Trey Avery gets one of those final spots. So 2 spots left. Go to safety. They could just keep the 4. It's between Mike Brown and Matthew Jackson. And I know a lot of people like Matthew Jackson. Matthew Jackson's a good special teams player too. He's like Hassan Haskins on defense. But I think Mike Brown can be just as good on special teams and is a better safety than Matthew Jackson. So I'm actually going to go with Mike Brown in the 4th spot out of my final 5. And that leaves 1 spot left. And TK McClendon is the last name I haven't mentioned here. He's got turf toe, so he could be out weeks. And I think that's not going to be able to get him a roster spot. So I think the 5th final bubble spot, I'm going to say it goes to someone who's not on the Titans right now, but is on another team. I think the Titans are going to poach somebody else's interior defensive line, and the final spot on the roster will go to someone who is not currently on the Titans team. They need another interior defensive lineman to go with Quentin Bohanna and Keandre Coburn. I think they want to have 6 there for their rotation. I've explained it throughout the show, and that leads me to this final jumping off place. So let me know your bubble, guys. Let me know your missing locks from Brian Callahan's. Let me know if you disagree with any of my locks. But that's going to do it for me today, folks. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow with a preview of the Titans' final preseason game of the year. Thumbs up on the video. Tighten up in the chat. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.